What's up, everyone? Welcome back to History on Repeat, the channel where we dig into wild stories your history teachers definitely didn't have time for. Today, we're not talking about one legendary gunfight. We're not breaking down a single battlefield moment. We're talking about the man who quietly rewrote how modern warfare works. This is the story of Roy Boehm, the man most people inside the community call the godfather of the Navy SEALs. But long before elite units, Cold War missions, or selection courses designed to break your soul, Roy Boehm was just a kid who grew up in the early 20th century. Before we get into today's episode, I want to talk to you about my new partner, Deemed Fit. If there's one thing history makes painfully clear, it's that strength isn't just physical. A lot of the people we talk about on this channel, soldiers, surgeons, elite military groups, and everyday heroes, carried invisible weight long before anyone ever talked about mental health. They pushed through stress, trauma, and burnout because they had to, often without support. And as a veteran who struggles with my own mental health and have had friends who have unfortunately lost their fight to theirs, Deemed Fit really stood out to me. Yes, they focus on fitness, but more importantly, they focus on mental resilience, accountability, and building habits that actually help people deal with stress instead of just masking it. Their approach isn't about chasing perfection. It's about showing up, staying consistent, and taking care of your head as much as your body. And Deemed Fit doesn't just talk the talk. They actively give a portion of every sale to EMTs, first responders, and those on the front lines, people who deal with chaos, pressure, and trauma as a part of their daily routine. The kind of people who are always there when things go sideways, but they don't always get the support they deserve. By partnering with Deemed Fit, you're not just supporting the channel, you're also supporting a company that believes fitness can be a tool for mental health, recovery, and purpose, not just aesthetics. So if you're looking for a program that cares about your mindset and not just your max lift, or if you want to support a brand that gives back to those who give everything, check out Deemed Fit. And by using my promo code HISTORYONREPEAT, you get 15% off your first order. The link's in the description below. All right, let's get back to the reason why you're all here.
It's History on Repeat.
Hell yeah.
Roy Boehm was born on April 9th, 1924, into a world that didn't hand out participation trophies or give second chances. America was still raw from industrialization, and the idea of comfort was relative at best. Discipline, self-reliance, and work ethic weren't buzzwords, they were survival skills. From a young age, Boehm showed signs that would later define him: structure, patience, and an intolerance for wasted effort. He wasn't known for being loud or flashy. He was known for paying attention, learning how things worked and why things failed, and why people quit. Basically a people watcher with a bit of the tism.
My mom says I'm special on the inside.
Those habits followed him straight into the U.S. Navy, where he enlisted during a time when the Navy was still very much a traditional, rank-driven institution. Boehm fit in, but he also stood out. When World War II erupted, Roy Boehm found himself inside a Navy that was learning modern warfare in real time, often through trial, error, and blood. Rather than serving as a frontline combat icon, Boehm's war was fought behind the scenes, in naval intelligence, planning, and amphibious operations. He worked in roles that required understanding not just in firepower, but timing, terrain, human behavior, and failure points. This mattered, because amphibious warfare in World War II was brutal. Landings failed, intelligence was incomplete, and plans broke down the moment boots hit the sand. Boehm saw this and soon realized that small, adaptable teams often succeeded where large, rigid forces struggled. He also witnessed the early use of specialized units like Navy frogmen, scouts, and demolition teams, which I may have done a video on already. Anyways, their job wasn't to fight the enemy head-on, but to shape the battlefield before the fight even began, clearing obstacles, reconning beaches, and gathering intelligence under extreme risk. Boehm paid attention to all of it. What he learned during World War II wasn't just tactics, it was philosophy. He learned that rank doesn't save you when the plan collapses, strength means nothing without judgment, and the men you want in the chaos aren't always the ones who look best on paper. By the end of the war, Boehm wasn't interested in medals or ceremonies. He was interested in what worked, what didn't, and more importantly, what war would look like in a modern era. Before SEALs became a brand, before movies, books, and podcasts, there was a serious problem facing the U.S. Navy. After World War II, America had unmatched firepower, massive fleets, aircraft carriers, and Marines ready to storm the beaches, which you would think would be a good thing. But when it came to slipping quietly into enemy territory from the sea, sabotaging ports, gathering intelligence, or operating deep behind enemy lines, the Navy really didn't have an answer. Warfare was changing and the Cold War was heating up. Guerrilla conflicts were spreading across Asia, coastlines, rivers, and harbors were becoming the new front lines, and large conventional forces just weren't built for that kind of fight. The Navy needed something different. Enter Roy Boehm. While most officers were content to settle into routine careers, Boehm kept pushing the limits. He remembered those small elite units he witnessed during World War II and went to work. The more he studied, the clearer it became. The Navy didn't need tougher sailors, it needed a completely different kind of one. Boehm envisioned a force that could enter from the sea without being detected, conduct reconnaissance, sabotage key targets, and operate independently with little to no support, then disappear without leaving a trace. These men wouldn't rely on rank to survive. They would rely on judgment, discipline, and adaptability. And most importantly, they would all be volunteers. In 1962, after years of pushing against bureaucracy, Boehm finally got his chance. The Navy approved the creation of 2 experimental units. SEAL Team 1 was established in Coronado, California, and SEAL Team 2 was formed in Little Creek, Virginia. Roy Boehm was placed in charge of both. There was no rulebook, no established doctrine, and no safety net. Boehm had to build everything from scratch, the training pipeline, the standards, the mindset, and from day one, he made it clear that it wasn't going to be a place for ego or glory hunters. If you were there for the wrong reasons, you weren't going to make it. Under Boehm's guidance, BUDS became less about brute strength and more about mental survival. Cold water, constant stress, sleep deprivation, and relentless pressure weren't there to punish candidates. They were there to strip them down. Boehm believed that in combat, physical strength fails long before the mind does. Hell Week wasn't about pain. It was about revealing who quits when no one is forcing them to stay. If you rang the bell, you were done. No speeches, no second chances, just gone. And then came Vietnam, or as Roy looked at it, his proving ground. Vietnam wasn't just another deployment. For the Navy SEALs, it was the moment everything Roy Boehm believed was either going to work or completely fall apart. The war in Vietnam didn't look like World War II. There were no clear lines and no beaches to storm. The enemy didn't wear uniforms, didn't fight fair, and didn't stick around once the shooting started. Instead, the battlefield was rivers, canals, mangroves, rice paddies, and villages that could be friendly during the day and hostile at night. And that's exactly where the SEALs went to work, operating primarily in the Mekong Delta and other coastal regions. SEAL platoons were tasked with missions most conventional units simply couldn't handle. These weren't large-scale assaults. These were small teams, often 6 to 8 men, moving quietly by boat or swimming in under the cover of darkness. Their job was to see without being seen. SEALs conducted reconnaissance patrols deep in enemy-controlled territory, mapping Viet Cong supply routes, identifying leadership targets, and confirming intelligence that couldn't be trusted from aerial photos or secondhand reports. If the intel checked out, they didn't call in a battalion. They handled it themselves. Ambushes were surgical and fast. SEAL teams would lie in wait along riverbanks, canals, or jungle trails for hours, sometimes days, striking suddenly and disappearing before the enemy even understood what happened. And when they left nothing behind. No footprints, no evidence, just confusion. One of the most effective roles SEALs played was counterinsurgency and psychological disruption. They targeted Viet Cong infrastructure, leadership figures, supply caches, weapons routes, not to rack up the body count, but to make the enemy feel unsafe everywhere. If you were VC, there was no safe area. That fear mattered. SEALs also conducted direct action raids on villages and river bases, often in coordination with intelligence assets. These missions required absolute discipline. A single mistake, a loud movement, a bad decision could compromise the entire team miles from friendly support. This is where Boehm's philosophy showed its value. There were no officers standing over their shoulders, no radio chatter filled with orders. SEALs were expected to assess the situation, make decisions on the fly, and live with the consequences. Initiative wasn't encouraged, it was required. Extraction was often the most dangerous part. Teams would pull out under fire, slipping back into rivers or swamps, sometimes swimming hundreds of yards in full gear to avoid detection. Boats weren't always an option. Helicopters weren't always available, and survival depended on preparation and calm under pressure. And sometimes things went wrong. Missions were compromised, teams were hunted, SEALs fought their way out of ambushes using terrain, darkness, and speed. Exactly the conditions Boehm trained them for. And by the late stages of the war, SEALs had developed a reputation that spread fast, not through press releases, but through enemy behavior. Viet Cong forces adjusted patrol routes, avoided waterways, and changed meeting locations. They knew the SEALs were out there, they just didn't know where.
I'm in danger!
Vietnam validated everything Roy Boehm believed about modern warfare. Small teams, independent judgment, relentless standards. SEALs didn't need overwhelming firepower. They needed freedom to think and act. And when given that freedom, they delivered results far beyond their size. Boehm wasn't in the jungle pulling triggers, but every decision those men made, how they trained, how they moved, how they fought, traced back to him. Vietnam didn't make the SEALs famous, it made them credible. And that credibility became the foundation for every operation that followed in the decades to come, even to this day. By the time Roy Boehm retired, the machine was already in motion. He didn't believe in micromanagement. He believed in building men who could think, decide, and survive on their own when everything went wrong. He didn't just create a unit, he created a culture, one built on accountability, resilience, and the understanding that not everyone belongs. And that's exactly the point. So the next time you hear about Navy SEALs operating in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, remember, it all started with one man who looked at the future of war and said, yeah, we can do that better. And then proved it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe to History on Repeat, and drop a comment on who you want me to cover next or, as usual, if I might have missed anything. Till next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's History on Repeat.
Hell yeah.